Why do we knock on wood? Today's big question, why do we knock on wood? My son, who's 4 feet tall, couldn't possibly be more adorable. And yet he is already developing an unhealthy fascination with knocking on random objects, and then immediately running away before I can stop him. So I figured it was time to explain the reason for this behavior. And it turns out that there's a few different reasons people knock on wood, but none of them involve my son trying to beat the tar out of me. The most popular theory traces back to ancient pagan beliefs about the spirits that lived inside trees, especially old large trees. These spirits were believed to be either good or evil, depending on the type of tree. Some trees were considered safe, and tapping them would alert any spirits living within them so they wouldn't be disturbed. Other trees, though, like the oak, were considered sacred. The Druids even had special names for the spirits living inside certain trees. They called them by the Memembelos, which literally translates to inner one. So if someone did need to cut down these sacred trees, they'd take extra precautions. First, they'd make sure to ask the spirit politely if they could chop down their tree, which seems nice. But then they'd also threaten the spirit by saying that if they didn't leave peacefully, they'd be chopped into splinters. This is definitely not nice. But it wasn't enough to just appease the tree spirit. You also needed to throw them a party. Yep, after politely asking the tree spirit to leave and threatening its existence, they would hold a ceremony where they invited other spirits from the area to come and watch the tree be cut down. So spirits of the forest floor, feel free to come gather around as we murder this tree. And once the tree was cut down, they'd have a feast to honor the tree spirit one last time before they used the tree for whatever purpose they had in mind. Because I guess a little tree spirit sacrifice was worth it if you needed the tree for, say, building a boat that would take you to America or something. But while all of these ancient pagans were busy murdering tree spirits, our ancestors over in the Middle East were busy coming up with a slightly different explanation for why trees seem to be haunted. And no, I don't mean different as in this tree is haunted by demons and this tree is haunted by angels. It was literally different. As in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions, trees weren't haunted by spirits at all. Instead, trees were simply a convenient place for demons to hide. Sometimes demons would possess people and cause them to go insane. And because chopping down a possessed tree could endanger anyone nearby, the person doing the chopping would knock on the tree first to alert the demon that they were about to get murdered. Then the demon would hopefully leave the tree before it was too late. Of course, if the demon was feeling particularly evil, they might choose to stay in the tree, in which case the person chopping it down would have to use a ritual to banish the demon before continuing. So why are we knocking on wood today? Well, if you're Jewish or Muslim, you probably aren't. But if you are Christian and you find yourself knocking on wood, you've got 2 options when it comes to explaining your behavior. First, you could say you're following in the footsteps of Jesus, since there's a story in the Bible about him cursing fig tree. And before he did, he knocked on the tree and scolded it for not having any figs on it. But that doesn't really seem to be the reason people knock on wood, at least not in America. See, the Christian explanation for knocking on wood actually comes from an old children's rhyme that goes, "Goddamn law, I'll knock my head off." This was originally an English translation of the German song, "Beware of the Evil One," which warned children not to walk alone through the forest, or they might end up being chased by the devil himself. In the original version, the devil is disguised as a little child. So you might think knocking on wood would be a good way to ward off the devil because, kids are usually scared of loud noises. But the lyrics say that you should instead turn around and go home. But if the devil gets close enough to you to make you want to run away, what does it matter if you knock on a tree? You're pretty much screwed. So how did the line about knocking your head off become part of the American lexicon? Well, apparently it's unclear. But another piece of folklore says that the phrase originated from sailors who would knock on the mast of their ship to warn off bad spirits before they set sail. According to the legend, when the Mayflower arrived in North America in 1620, the Pilgrims continued the tradition of knocking on wood to ward off evil. They probably didn't even realize that the evil they were trying to keep away was one of their own. After all, these days, superstitious sailors and pilgrims seem like the least of the things I need to worry about when I knock on wood. Because as long as I knock on wood, I'm totally immune to everything bad happening to me ever again, right? Well, despite how many times you've knocked on wood, it hasn't helped you avoid getting here. The part where I tell you that you wrong, and there's actually a third explanation for why people knock on wood. See, knocking on wood isn't just something ancient pagans, Jews, Muslims, Christians, and superstitious sailors have done throughout history. For hundreds of years, people from a variety of cultures have knocked on wood for all sorts of reasons. In ancient Rome, people would knock on a wooden doorframe before making a wish. And if their wish came true, they'd knock on another wooden object to thank the gods. Even ancient Thebes had a custom of knocking on the handle of a bucket while making a wish, although they were hoping their wish would come true before they died. And in ancient Greece, people believed that if you made a boastful statement, a god would send someone to punish you unless you knocked on a tree and crossed your fingers to ward off bad luck. And speaking of ancient Greece, the Romans adopted the Greek religion eventually, but they rejected the idea that trees could house spirits, and so they changed the stories a bit. Instead of knocking on trees to ward off bad luck, they started knocking on household items to ward off evil spirits. So you see, knocking on wood has been a pretty consistent practice across different cultures for thousands of years, but we're not exactly sure why. For example, in Lithuania, it's considered good luck to knock on the bread oven before entering the house. And in Hungary, knocking on the corner of a new piece of furniture will bring good luck to the family. And in the Ottoman Empire, they believed that knocking on the doorframe with the palm of your hand brought good luck. And in China, they knock on the main beam of the house to drive away evil spirits. But wait a minute, the ancient Romans believed that knocking on household items could ward off evil spirits. And the ancient Greeks believed that knocking on a tree could prevent you from dying. And the ancient pagans believed that knocking on a tree alerted the spirit inside, so you could cut it down without murdering it. So which one's right? Well, as usual, the answer is that none of them are right. See, those are just theories, and none of them have any scientific evidence to back them up. All we know for certain is that people have been knocking on random things for thousands of years, and we don't know why. And it's just not as though I am going to start doing experiments to try to figure out if knocking on wood increases my odds of getting hit by lightning. I mean, I love this channel, but I draw the line at sacrificing myself to science. So until we get some answers, we're going to have to keep relying on hunches, guesses, and folklore to explain this persistent human behavior. And to be honest, I kind of like it that way. There rests something nice about knowing that no one will ever be able to explain why we knock on wood, just like no one can explain why cats land on their feet or why babies can smile before they're reborn. There are some things in life that are best left unexplained. Speaking of things that are best left unexplained, don't look under your bed tonight.